Today's video is one I've wanted to make for a while, and I want to go over some of the things I've done to the XT225 because hopefully it'll serve as sort of an FAQ, of frequently asked questions, for visitors to this channel, because I do get a lot of inquiries about what kind of foot pegs am I using, what kind of tires, grips, things like that. So now I'll be able to hopefully refer people to this video. It will also serve as a follow-up to a recent budget mod video where I made some changes to the front forks, the rear tire, and the gearing. And so I'll let you know how that's all worked out. And while I'm using my XT225, of course, hopefully these things that I've done will serve not only XT225 owners, but anybody taking a budget-minded approach to outfitting their dual sport. So we'll look at the controls of the bike, I'll mention what I've done to suspension, to the engine, and then any other accessories. In my opinion, the first place you should address on any bike is making it comfortable for you before you worry about any kind of performance mods or any kind of trick-looking bling. Just make the bike fit you, your style of riding, and what you find comfortable. So starting with the handlebars, these are Turner aluminum handlebars. The stock bars are mild steel, they bend easily, so I immediately went with some 7/8 inch replacement handlebars, aluminum. They're much sturdier, and they're in a YZ bend, and they came in blue. Now, I don't know if Turner bars are still widely available. I think with a number of things here on the bike, part numbers change. You may not find the exact thing, but you'll get the idea. Next up are these Acerbis Rally Profile handguards. And the profile models are the budget ones. They're all plastic, all polypropylene or whatever. So they're a little bit more budget, and they're lighter weight than, say, the Acerbis Pro Rally handguards, which have the metal in them. I think as far as these go, they're good for lighter bikes. The completely plastic Acerbis handguards, they've been fine for this motorcycle. I've wrecked on them a few times. They've held up. I did in the beginning have a crash, and they rotated on the handlebars because they weren't quite tight enough. So watch the tightness if you get the profile handguards. I really do debate right now, though, whether if I were to buy these today, would I get the profiles or would I go with the pros with the metal? I just don't know. I think that's something you'll just kind of have to think of yourself. I'm not dissatisfied with these, but I think the metal ones would be a little bit sturdier. I might go that route. Just depends on what price I could find them at. When it comes to grips, I have these O'Neill diamond motocross grips, and this is the first time I've ever had this diamond pattern. I ended up with these grips in kind of an interesting way. They're open-ended, which means the end is cut off. They're built to be used with these handguards. Now, it's very simple to adapt any grip to these handguards. You just have to cut the end of them off. But I wanted to try an open-end grip just so the throttle would work really well, just so the whole thing was kind of made as a cohesive unit. Well, what I've found since are I'm not crazy about the diamond pattern on these grips right now. For dual sporting, I think for motocross, the diamond pattern's good. It gives you a whole lot of control. You have great input to the bike, but I think for dual sporting, I'd like to eventually go back to a typical waffle pattern grip that will hold up better in the eastern mud where I ride. These are more, I would say, for dry environments. Plus something a little bit fatter with just a little bit more cushion, since dual sporting or trail riding involves being in the saddle all day. It's not quite as much about performance, though you need good grip. It's a little bit more about comfort and being able to work in a variety of conditions. So next time I'd probably pass on the diamond grips, just passing that info along to you. A number of people have asked about the foot pegs, and I think that's one of the very, very best mods you can make to the bike. It gives more control, more confidence. I absolutely love these pegs. They were on it when I got it, actually. They were installed by the previous owner, and I've been able to determine they are the pegs from DMO Specialties. It's just a small business run by a guy that makes these pegs specifically for the XT225, the TW200, maybe a couple others. I urge you to invest in the pegs. They're sturdy. I love the sharpness of the teeth, and they're that nice wide platform. If I have any criticism, you'll see that I did bash this one peg in just a bit. It's flat on one side because hit a rock pretty darn hard, and I think there's this trade-off. You can have something super sturdy that won't bend, maybe that's good, but if something like this bends, maybe it saved the entire mount from being bent or ripped off the motorcycle or something. So no complaints about the pegs, highly recommended, definitely get them. Next up, suspension. There really isn't a whole lot of adjustability on the XT225 or any of the more budget dual sports or older dual sports, really. As far as the rear suspension goes, there are only two things that the user can adjust. One is the spring preload to set the sag, and you can find that information online, how to set sag or what it should be on the XT225. And then there's also a rebound damping adjustment, which has just 5 clicks on it. Now, the suspension works great, as I've mentioned in other videos, for 95% of what I do. For that other 5%, it does bottom out pretty harshly. So I wish that it had a compression damping setting rather than a rebound setting, because I would like to make that compression stiffer. I actually haven't even messed with the rebound setting because I have no complaints there. As far as the front forks go, if you saw my recent budget mod video, you saw that I shortened the fork spring 2 inches, substituted a spacer, and then went to heavier fork oil from 10 weight to 15 weight. It makes a tremendous difference. The forks are much better on the harsher stuff. They don't feel harsh on the easier stuff. And overall, for the time and expense involved, it's a great, great mod. I think if you want to go beyond that, you're going to get into more money. For me, that was a good place to set the forks up. So overall, happy with the suspension. Wish it could take some bigger hits though. As for the engine, it's stock except for 2 small things. I did do a slight mod to the carburetor to help with the cold starting and the idling. It's where you pull out this brass plug from the bottom of the carburetor, then you have access to the fuel screw, which is then backed out some additional turns. You back it out to around 3 turns depending on where you live. And for more information on that carb mod, I'll put a link in the description below to a forum that describes all of that. But it definitely is a help to the motorcycle. I didn't have to do any other jetting because the pipe and all other aspects of the engine are still stock. The only other change has been to the gearing. I went down from a 15-tooth front sprocket to a 14-tooth, which gears the bike overall lower. I anticipated it would help with slower speed riding and off-road, and it definitely does. I love it there, and I love it everywhere. Even for higher speed riding, it helps so much with acceleration. If you're completely wound out, you can even run it up to 70 miles an hour in 5th gear. Then when you click it up into 6th, which is more like an overdrive, it goes a little faster, 76, 77, but it lets the engine work easier. Does it affect overall top speed? Yes, probably, but I would say only if you're really in perfect conditions. Flat road, no wind, but for the real world conditions I ride in, twisty roads, up hills, into the wind, I love the lower gearing. Maybe a little sacrifice for miles per gallon, a couple miles per gallon difference, but that's a very small price to pay. When it comes to what I'll refer to as the body and accessories of the motorcycle, we'll start with this front fender that I installed. It's off of a 2009 Yamaha WR250 off-road model. I think an even newer fender would work on the bike, but I just don't like the most current generation because they're super angular. They just don't fit with the look of the motorcycle quite as much. This 2009 fender is a great match as far as both color and I think the overall feel of the bike. It makes it more contemporary than the stock XT fender, but it doesn't take us to a completely different place. I did have to, and I'll link to the fender mod video up above, I did have to shorten the rear of the fender a bit to clear the exhaust. And I also had to put some spacers to drop that fender down a little bit to clear the wiring harness. So that is a bit of a compromise. Overall, I like the fender. I've gotten compliments on it. But I did have to make these little compromises of dropping it a little bit lower. It doesn't quite mate to the headlight as well as I'd like, so I'll work on that. Then behind the headlight, I have my DIY turn signal buzzer. And I really love this little thing for a couple of reasons. One, when I first installed it, I felt a little weird about having this thing beeping so loudly at intersections and things, but it does make other drivers aware, and that's cool. And then secondly, I really created it because I noticed in my YouTube videos, if I was talking to the camera when I would make a turn with the turn signal, it would just continue flashing for a couple of miles because I would forget to turn the turn signal off. And this serves as a reminder. So I like the setup. I remember my dad had a bike like this back in the 80s. Haven't really heard or seen them since, but I love it. That's another one where above I'll link to the video on how I constructed that. Then lastly, we have back here, we have a rack, and then on the rack I have a repurposed tank bag. This tank bag is made by a company called Rapid Transit. I don't think this model is around any longer. Rapid Transit, I believe, is, but this is a squarish tank bag. It's magnetic. It clasps to the tank of my other bikes, my Ninja 250 or my SR 250 Yamaha. And I love it back here because it has some buckles that I can zip tie very securely to the luggage rack. I use multiple zip ties just in case one breaks, and every year a couple of them do. Then it's also expandable as far as height goes. So I can put my normal stuff in it, then I can expand it and also fit a jacket into it. I'll cut off the zip ties here so we can look at the rack. Now the rack is another accessory that the previous owner had put on the bike, and overall it's okay, but I do have a couple of complaints. It is built very sturdy like that. I like the width of it. I know that Moose Racing makes a rack for the motorcycle that's even wider, so if you're wanting to do long trips and carry a bunch of stuff, that would be the way to go. But for the kind of day trips that I primarily do and the trail riding, I do like the width of this rack. The one real complaint I have about it is the fact that it sits a couple of inches up high off of the fender and the seat. So once you start stacking things there, you really have to throw your leg up high to get back on the bike, especially if you're in an awkward position on the trail. So there are some racks I've seen on eBay or XT225.com that do mount lower, almost right on the fender. And I think at some point I might go that route. It just depends on if I want to spend the money to do that, but I think my advice to you is if you're looking at a rack, do take that into consideration. What's the width of the rack that you want, and then also, does it matter if it sits up off of the rear fender? There's really not enough room to utilize this space for much else. So maybe if it was another inch higher, I'd find I could keep inner tubes or something there, but the way that it is, I'm not really crazy about it. And lastly, the tires. I typically run budget tires on the dual sports, and I've used the Shinko 244s a lot. That's what I've had on this bike for the majority of its life. And I think the Shinko 244 front and rear, you can get them both tires for a combined total of under $100 or around $100 with shipping. And they do a great job on the street, decent job on the dirt, and they wear really well. I get 3,000, 3,500 miles out of a rear tire on a lightweight bike like this, maybe 9,000, 10,000 off of a front tire if you're willing to take it to its limit. But I recently put a Kenda K270 on the rear, and the K270 is considered a close cousin of the Shinko 244, but I find it has a bit better bite in the dirt. I really do like it there. And if there are any complaints about it that I've heard, it's the side knobs are very soft. It has more side knobs on it, which are good for the dirt. But I've heard people say it's a little squirrely on the road. On a lightweight bike like this, I've since been able to ride it quite a bit. I can lean the bike over, no problem. Never had a moment's problem. And it's also a nice, affordable tire. I like it so much that I'm gonna match the K270 rear Kenda with a K270 Kenda on the front also. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works out. And that's a hot lap around my 2006 Yamaha XT225 and the modifications that have been made to it. And I think you can see that it's all relatively simple stuff, mostly tailored to just making the bike more comfortable, making it handle a little bit better. I don't think I'm going to go in on any further engine mods. I did debate getting a performance exhaust, and I asked for viewer comments, and that video's above where I go through that. And you can also read the comments. And I think for now, just going to leave that stock. I think if anything I would do, it would be yet another thing to increase comfort, maybe invest the $200 or $250 into a seat concept seat. This seat, the stock one, does surprisingly well. I don't have any great complaints, but the foam is just a bit softer and it's older foam, and I think Seat Concepts does such a great job. I've had those seats on other bikes that would give me just that little bit extra boost as far as comfort goes. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I would love to hear any comments or questions you have. Please leave them below. It's always great to hear your perspective and to hear what you have maybe done to your motorcycle, because everybody then gets to share in that knowledge. If you've liked this video, please do give it a like, and please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm heading toward 1,000 subscribers, and that's a goal for the year, and it would be awesome to reach that, and I appreciate your help there. Alrighty, thanks so much for watching. Next video, I'll probably see you on the road, and when I do, please, let's all ride safe.